Hey everybody, so today, to kind of wrap everything up, I want to talk about storytelling inside of environments. And this can be games, movies, illustrations, whatever. Everything we do, as I've mentioned several times, is all storytelling. And the question is, how do we storytell with just an environment? It's easy, you can think about this as like writing a short story, making a piece of music, making a game or a movie. Obviously, there's stories to be told here, but how are they done in environments? So I like to use this example of Disneyland, which is an incredibly well-designed and very thought-out environment for people to navigate. In fact, some people I know call it one of the few examples of game design or level design in the real world. I had the pleasure on one of the LA trips of getting to go around Disneyland with an Imagineer. And my buddy Jeremy and I got to talk to him, and he pointed out all sorts of cool details about the layout and the intention and the design. There was this kind of principle of why it's laid out the way it is and why you walk down to get into Disneyland and go back up, because they didn't want you to see anything. You only see the castle when you first walk into Main Street. Otherwise, you see the train station first when you pull up to the place. Then you see the castle and you start walking towards it. As you start walking towards it, though, you don't notice because, like, in the profile, here's the statue. What happens is everyone walks towards the castle naturally because it's the biggest thing in your view. You want to walk towards it. And when you get there, you actually find this statue. It has the nice little thing on it. It's actually a great meeting place. A lot of people meet there. And there's a large ring and rotunda, room for people to stand around. And it gives you this introduction of what the park is about. It's about Walt Disney and his vision. And when you get here, there becomes other things you can see. We can actually start to see the other mountains that are laid out across the park. And so we still see the castle, but we get to the castle. When we get to this point, then we lead to the other places. This is called a hub and spoke world design. And so it is intentionally designed with this hub and spoke model to be able to see the essential things, to be able to move from one location to another and to direct our attention. There are secondary mountains in the park beyond the castles, and you can see all of the mountains from that statue. So you walk in, you go down Main Street, which is a single straight line. It leads you straight to the castle. You get to the castle and you stop at the statue and you look around, and here's all of these opportunities. And each of these looks different. I can go into the frontier, I can go into the mountains, I can go into space or the future, and each of them has distinct and special sight lines, but you never see those when you're walking down Main Street. This is the kind of direction that they came up with. And the technique they called was a weenie. Walt had made a lot of films, and one of the ways that they got dogs to act in a scene is you'd put a hot dog on the end of the stick and wave it at the camera, and the dog would like look and wave around. It was a way you could get the dog to shake its head or nod, or even just direct its attention. And he said the same way that he designed that these weenies were used in films, they wanted to design their parks to direct the attention. When we make images, we don't want your eyes drifting all over the place. We want focal points. We want things to look at. We want pieces and points of interest. So, taking that to films, rocks sometimes can direct our attention very distinctively, like Pride Rock from The Lion King, or the Pirates Rock Cove in Peter Pan. A natural formation that's still unusual. I think Pride Rock is like, you recognize it if you saw it. It's so distinctive. And this skull sort of island here is also very doom and gloom and foreboding, but they're very important to these films, and it helps provide a visual focus for the scene, as well as let you know where we're going and what's going to happen there. These kind of rocks exist in the real world too. Left is pictured rocks in the upper part of Michigan. On the right is Devil's Tower, popularized in the Steven Spielberg film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. These things demand and direct our attention, and we want to look at them and we want to examine them more closely. The supporting environments around them help us go towards them because they become natural focal points. Sets themselves, of course, just like our 3D scenes, when we pull out a little bit more, don't really look like the real thing. This is an example from the film Hail Caesar, where they're sort of doing a song and dance number, and they actually pull our camera back so we can see what the production would have looked like. But in the fiction of the film, you never see the lights up top. You never see back here. You don't see these guys pushing parts of the floor around to clear it out for the camera to be able to transition smoothly from the bar to a bunch of people sitting there. And so all of a sudden, seamlessly, this whole scene has erupted. This is the kind of very sophisticated coordination that they used to have to do for a lot of films. Of course, before CG, now they'd probably just CG it. We're doing the same kind of thing. We decorate these sets, but if we take a step back, it's all a facade and it's all fake. It's just arranged there for just the small part of the frame we can actually see. I want you to think about what goes on in your bag. What are the items you carry with you every day? If you open it up and you lay it out and you start noting it, can someone tell the kind of person you are from the contents of your bag? I'm guessing they probably can. That probably says a lot about you, the things you choose to carry with you every day. Same thing, your rooms and your environment say a lot about you. This, every space has a distinct purpose and a distinct need. So they're supposed to feel differently. A garage should feel clean and slick. A kitchen should be inviting and maybe clean. A bedroom should feel comfortable and warm. And a bathroom can be pink because maybe it's supposed to feel soft in there. I don't think I would do this much fuzzy carpet on my bathroom personally, but that's this person's choice. This is a good example. This is an environment art piece from MSU student, one of my friends, Sarah Zelnak. She did a really nice job of capturing this idea. It's not just a room. It's not just a game environment. It is the room of a girl living in the late 90s, early 2000s, who is into Nick Magazine and Sailor Moon and renting stuff at Blockbuster Video. And she's a big Wings fan, so there are Wings jerseys there, but it's still distinctively a girl's room. She said she wanted to create her dream room for her 12-year-old kind of self. And it feels it. It's the ultimate picture of that. And this was a piece that got her a job as an environment artist in the game industry. And of all the other scenes that were just here's another castle, here's another dungeon, here's another sci-fi hallway, the art team looked at this and said, it's so personal and it's so distinctive, but it's telling such a story. In fact, the more I stare at it, I always pick out more little details like the stickers on the side of the pink TV, the little cards like Pokemon cards arranged out on the floor, scattered around, the rubber bands from hair ties, all these things like homework that's being done, a science textbook, things like the butterflies on the wall, everything is here telling some kind of story. Even thinking about this wall would have been painted maybe when she was much younger, 6, 7, or 8. And she's starting to grow up, but she still has these interests that are diverging between, horses and video games. And I just love that as an idea. There's so much going on in this scene. And the little messiness of the room just always gives me so many things to look at and drift around. What we want to think about when we're creating scenes is areas of interest and areas of rest. This is a good example from Neil Blevins, where the image on the left is just sort of noisy and the image on the right is much more interesting. By focusing our contrast and our shapes into this distinctive avenue, we create almost looks like I'm looking at a street from the top down. There's a distinction and intention of movement, whereas here everything's relatively equal and it's much harder to track what I'm supposed to be looking at. We want to focus our areas of interest and also have areas of relative rest where things contrast-wise are lower contrast versus smaller, more rapid, and higher contrast. We also want to group things together. This is a thing you get a lot, and I want to talk to you about this because when we're placing trees and rocks and plants, having them spread out evenly is often natural, and that's okay, but it's much more interesting to group and clump them together. And think about it this way, trees are more likely to be clumped together because it's more likely that they were in one tree was a seedling and it dropped off more seeds, and that seed dropped off more seeds, and they spread out from a center. So trees have natural tree lines and natural regions. Instead, if the trees are all just distinctively evenly spaced out, it's okay, but it's not as interesting as something clustered and clumped together. Small rocks tend to be around the base of larger rocks because those larger rocks fell from even larger rocks, and those rocks fell apart and chipped and broke into smaller and smaller rocks. And so there's this trickling down effect, a pyramid of stuff that tends to be grouped and clustered with like things. When we're thinking about environment design, everything can still be, it doesn't necessarily, just because it's natural doesn't mean it can't be ordered. This is an example I found online, which I really loved, is a strategy game called Forged of Blood, and you could see that their level design was very distinctively laid out, intentionally grid-like with very distinct levels, and then they just sort of layer the features on top of it. It's still the same layout, but it feels a lot more natural, and suddenly it doesn't feel so grid-like. By just being intentional about how these assets are used and spread around, creating interesting little areas like a little cluster of rocks down here, or this rock wall in the back with a few trees put together, creates something much more interesting. So what we're going to do next is I'll show you how we can actually use some automatic tools in Blender to help us scatter some things around, and then we're going to put everything in our scenes together.